I Died and Jesus revealed the truth about political division in America. The bright lights of the TV studio blazed around me as I sat behind the gleaming desk, ready to deliver my usual political commentary. I was Madison Clark, respected pundit, fighting for what I believed was right. Little did I know, my world was about to be turned upside down. That day, something unprecedented happened. I experienced something beyond this world that shook me to my core. I realized I wasn't part of the solution, but part of the problem. Are you ready to see America through God's eyes? What I'm about to share will challenge everything you think you know about our divided nation. I never expected that Tuesday to be any different from the hundreds of debates I'd done before. But God had other plans for me, plans that would change my life forever. As I stepped into the studio that morning, the air felt heavy with tension. The light seemed brighter than usual, and the makeup artist's hands trembled slightly as she touched up my face. I could feel the weight of the upcoming election pressing down on all of us. My opponent, a seasoned politician with a reputation for sharp words, stood across from me. His eyes gleamed with determination, and I knew this debate would be fiercer than any we'd had before. The camera crew bustled around us, making last-minute adjustments. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. As the red light on the camera blinked on, I plastered on my most confident smile. The moderator's voice rang out, introducing us and setting the stage for what was supposed to be just another heated discussion about America's future. But as my opponent began speaking, something felt off. A strange feeling washed over me, unlike anything I'd ever experienced before. It started as a tingling in my fingertips, then spread up my arms and across my chest. I blinked hard, trying to focus on the words being thrown at me. Suddenly, the studio lights began to blur and swim before my eyes. The room started to spin, slowly at first, then faster and faster. I gripped the edges of the podium, my knuckles turning white. My opponent's voice sounded far away, like he was speaking from the bottom of a well. My heart raced, pounding so hard I was sure the microphones would pick it up. Sweat beaded on my forehead, and I felt a chill run down my spine. My legs began to shake uncontrollably. I opened my mouth to speak, to call for help, but no words came out. My tongue felt thick and useless. Through the haze that was quickly overtaking my vision, I saw Lisa's face. My co-anchor and friend stood just off camera, her eyes wide with worry. She took a step toward me, her mouth forming words I couldn't hear. And then, everything went black. I felt myself falling into an endless void. The studio, the lights, the cameras, all of it disappeared in an instant. In that moment of terrifying darkness, I had no idea that my journey was just beginning. When I opened my eyes again, I wasn't in the studio anymore. I wasn't even on Earth. I found myself standing in a massive courtroom, unlike anything I'd ever seen before. The walls seemed to stretch up forever, disappearing into a brilliant light above. The floor beneath my feet shimmered like polished gold, intricate patterns swirling beneath the surface. And there, at the center of it all, stood Jesus. He wasn't the gentle, meek figure I'd seen in Sunday school paintings. This Jesus radiated power and authority. His eyes pierced right through me, seeing every thought, every action, every word I'd ever spoken. I felt naked and exposed before him, all my carefully crafted public persona stripped away. As I stood there, trembling, an unseen force began to present a case. But it wasn't just any case. It was the case of America's fractured state. Images flashed before my eyes, scenes of hatred and division playing out across our nation. I saw demonic forces whispering lies into the ears of politicians, media influencers, and everyday citizens, turning them against each other. With horror, I realized I was one of those influencers. I saw myself on screen, my words fueling the very chaos and division I was now witnessing. The weight of my actions crashed down on me, and I fell to my knees, overwhelmed by the truth of what I'd done. Jesus spoke then, his voice both terrible and beautiful. He showed me the true cost of our division, communities torn apart, families estranged, the slow erosion of the values that once made our nation strong. I saw key moments in history where unity could have prevailed, but selfishness and pride won instead. Tears streamed down my face as I begged for forgiveness, for another chance. I knew in that moment that I had to change, that I had to be part of the solution instead of part of the problem. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the vision ended. I felt myself being pulled back, away from the courtroom, away from Jesus. His final words echoed in my ears as everything faded to black once more. The forces of darkness are strong, but the prayers and actions of those who choose love over hatred are stronger. Go back, Madison. Be a voice for unity, not division. At first, I couldn't make sense of what was happening. The light surrounded me, gentle and warm. It wasn't like anything I'd ever felt before. I tried to move, but I couldn't feel my body. I was just there, my thoughts and awareness floating in this ocean of light. I tried to speak, to call out, but no sound came. That's when the fear really hit me. Was I really dead? Had my life ended right there on that debate stage? I wanted to panic, but something about the light kept me calm. It was like being wrapped in a warm blanket, safe and protected. Then I felt it, a gentle tug pulling me forward. I couldn't see where I was going, but I knew I was moving. The force wasn't scary, it felt right. Like this was exactly where I was supposed to be, even if I didn't understand why. For just a moment, I caught a glimpse of the TV studio fading away. The lights, the cameras, my opponent's shocked face. It all seemed so small and unimportant now. As the last traces of my old life disappeared, I felt a wave of sadness. Would I ever see that world again? The light started to change. It got brighter, almost blindingly so. The brightness was everywhere, inside and outside of me. It should have been painful, but it wasn't. It was beautiful in a way I can't even describe. As I moved through this sea of light, I felt a mix of total peace and complete awe. I knew I was experiencing something most people never do. I was seeing behind the curtain of life itself. Just when I thought the light couldn't get any brighter, it started to change. The formless glow began to take shape. At first, I couldn't make out what I was seeing. Everything was blurry and shifting. But slowly, things started to come into focus. The light wasn't just light anymore. It was forming into something. As the brightness faded, I found myself in a place beyond anything I could have imagined. Colors I didn't even have names for swirled around me. The air felt alive with energy. I could move, I could look around, and what I saw took my breath away, if I still had breath to take. Stretching out before me was a vast expanse filled with life. Beings of light moved all around. Some looked almost human, while others were so different I couldn't even begin to describe them. They moved with purpose, as if they were all part of some grand design. And then, in the distance, I saw something that made everything else fade away. A city of pure light. It shimmered and glowed, more beautiful than anything I'd ever seen on Earth. The buildings seemed to be made of living light, towering impossibly high into a sky that radiated pure love. I knew then, without a doubt, that I was seeing heaven. Not the fluffy clouds and pearly gates of children's stories, but the real thing, the true home of every soul that has ever lived. And in that moment, I understood why Jesus had sent me back. This wasn't my time to stay. I had work to do back on Earth. But my journey wasn't over yet. What I was about to witness next would shake the very foundations of everything I thought I knew about our world and what lies beyond. Dark shadows crept across the golden floor, moving like smoke, but thicker, more alive. As they got closer, I realized they weren't just shadows. They were creatures, twisted, ugly things that made my skin crawl. These dark beings moved among the people Jesus had shown me. They whispered in ears, their words too quiet for me to hear. But I saw what those whispers did. A woman smiling at her neighbor suddenly frowned and turned away. A man reading news on his phone grew angrier with each word. Two friends calmly discussing politics erupted into a shouting match within seconds. I wanted to scream, to warn them all. Don't listen! It's not real! But no one could hear me. I was just a witness to this awful scene. The shadows kept moving, kept whispering. I saw how easily they planted seeds of doubt, fear, and anger. A half-truth here, a twisted fact there. Before long, whole communities were infected with suspicion and hate. Families once close were torn apart. A father and son yelled at each other over dinner, neither listening, both convinced they were right. The darkness hovered around them, growing stronger with every harsh word. It wasn't just regular folks. These demonic forces circled politicians and news anchors too. Eyes hardened, voices rose. Instead of seeking understanding, they only wanted to win at any cost. The worst part was seeing the demons grow stronger. Every argument, every mean comment online, every family split apart, it fed them. They grew bigger, darker, more powerful with each bit of division they caused. It was like watching a wildfire spread. What started as small sparks of disagreement turned into raging infernos of hatred, consuming everything in their path. I felt sick watching it all. How had we been so blind? We thought we were fighting each other, but the real enemy was right there, pulling our strings like puppets. Jesus looked at me, his eyes full of sorrow. Do you see now, Madison? This is the battle for the heart and soul of America. It's about love versus hate, unity versus division. I nodded, unable to speak. I'd been part of this. My words on TV, my snarky tweets, my refusal to listen. I'd been feeding these monsters without knowing it. But it's not hopeless, Jesus said gently. Look closer. I blinked away tears and focused again. This time, I saw little sparks of light pushing back against the darkness, a woman hugging her neighbor instead of turning away, a man putting down his phone to talk face to face, two friends choosing to listen and understand rather than argue. Each small act of love and unity made the shadows shrink back. The demons hissed and retreated when faced with genuine kindness and understanding. This is the power you have, Jesus told me. Every choice to love, to forgive, to seek unity, it drives back the darkness. It's not easy, but it's the only way to heal your nation. I watched in awe as more people resisted the whispers of division. It wasn't everyone, not even close. But those who chose love seemed to glow with an inner light the shadows couldn't touch. For the first time since this vision began, I felt hope. We weren't helpless, we had a choice. We could listen to the whispers of hatred and fear, or we could choose to love even when it was hard. That glimmer of hope I felt was about to be tested. Jesus turned to me, his eyes now filled with a sorrow so deep it made my heart ache. Madison, he said, his voice heavy, are you ready to see the true cost of what's happening? I wanted to say no. I wanted to run away from whatever he was about to show me, but I knew I had to face it. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. In an instant, the courtroom around us faded away. We were standing in the middle of a typical American neighborhood. Houses lined the street, their lawns neatly trimmed. But something was terribly wrong. I saw a little girl, no more than 7 or 8, sitting on the front steps of her house. She was crying, her small shoulders shaking. Through the open window, I could hear her parents shouting at each other. Their angry words were all about politics, who was right, who was wrong, who was ruining the country. Daddy says Grandpa can't come for Christmas anymore, the little girl whispered to her teddy bear. He says Grandpa's ideas are dangerous, but I love Grandpa. Why can't they just get along? My heart broke for her. I wanted to run over and give her a hug, to tell her it would be okay. But Jesus gently shook his head. We were only observers here. The scene shifted, and we were standing in front of a small-town church. The sign out front proclaimed it to be First Baptist of Hope Springs. But as we got closer, I could see the church was literally split down the middle. A line of tape ran right through the sanctuary, dividing the congregation. On one side, people sat with stern faces, holding signs about traditional values. On the other, a smaller group huddled together, rainbow flags draped over their shoulders. The pastor stood at the pulpit, his face anguished as he tried to bring peace. But neither side was listening. They've forgotten my most important command, Jesus said softly. To love one another as I have loved them. They're so focused on being right, they've forgotten how to be kind. We moved again, this time to a college campus. 2 women sat on a bench, an uncomfortable silence between them. I recognized the hurt and anger in their eyes. It was a look I'd seen in the mirror too many times. I can't believe you'd support him, one of them finally said. After everything he's done, everything he stands for, I thought I knew you." The other woman stood up, her voice shaking. 20 years of friendship, and this is what ends it? A political disagreement? Fine. I guess I never really knew you either." As she walked away, both women started to cry. I felt their pain like a physical blow. How many friendships had I seen end just like this? How many had I let go myself? The visions came faster now. A Thanksgiving dinner turned to shouting match. Neighbors who once shared backyard barbecues now glaring at each other over their fences. A workplace where tension simmered just below the surface, ready to explode at the slightest provocation. With each scene, I felt the weight of division grow heavier. It was like watching a beautiful tapestry being torn apart, thread by thread. The fabric of our society, the trust, the compassion, the sense of shared purpose that had held us together for so long, it was all unraveling before my eyes. "This is the true cost, Madison," Jesus said. His voice was filled with such sorrow that it brought tears to my eyes. "It's not just about politics or power, it's about the very soul of your nation." He waved his hand, and suddenly I could see it all at once. A map of America, but instead of states and cities, I saw millions of tiny lights. Each one, I knew, represented a person, but so many of those lights were dimming, cut off from the ones around them. Every broken relationship, every lost connection, every heart hardened against their neighbor, it weakens the whole, Jesus explained. A house divided cannot stand, and America... His voice trailed off, and I felt the weight of his unspoken words. As the visions faded and we returned to the courtroom, I felt like I could hardly breathe. The weight of what I had seen was almost too much to bear. How had we let things get so bad? How had I been so blind to the damage we were causing? The weight of our nation's brokenness crushed my spirit. But then Jesus asked me a question that made my blood run cold. What if I told you it didn't have to be this way? Before I could even respond, the world around us began to shift. Suddenly, I found myself floating above scenes from America's past. It was like watching a movie, but I could feel every emotion as if I were really there. Jesus guided me through pivotal moments in our history. I saw the aftermath of the Civil War, a time when our country could have truly come together. I watched as soldiers from both sides laid down their arms, exhausted from the bloodshed. For a moment, there was hope, but then I saw politicians in fancy suits, their faces twisted with bitterness. They chose revenge over reconciliation. I watched as they passed harsh laws, punishing the South instead of healing the wounds. The divide between North and South grew deeper, poisoning our nation for generations to come. The Great Depression unfolded before my eyes. I saw long lines of desperate people waiting for bread, their hollow eyes and sunken cheeks breaking my heart. Families huddled together in makeshift shelters, clinging to each other for warmth. This shared suffering could have brought us together, but fear took hold instead. I watched the rich barricade themselves in their mansions while the poor fought over scraps. Communities that could have supported each other crumbled under the weight of suspicion and blame. The civil rights movement shook me to my core. I saw brave men and women marching for equality, their faces determined despite the hatred surrounding them. But instead of embracing change, many chose violence. I watched in horror as police turned fire hoses on peaceful protesters, their skin bruising under the force of the water. I saw a little girl trying to go to school, surrounded by a sea of angry faces shouting racial slurs. The country could have come together in understanding, but instead, it fractured along racial lines that persist to this day. As the visions faded, I felt a deep sense of regret wash over me. How different things could have been if we had chosen love over hate, understanding over judgment, unity over division. I thought of my own life, how many times I'd let fear or pride keep me from reaching out to someone different from me. Every harsh word I'd spoken online, every time I dismissed someone's perspective without really listening, I was part of the problem too. Jesus looked at me with eyes full of sorrow and compassion. "Do you see now?" he asked gently. "Every choice matters, every word, every action, every moment of forgiveness or understanding. They all ripple out and affect the whole. I nodded, unable to speak through my tears. The missed opportunities of our past haunted me, but I also felt a spark of hope. If small choices could lead us so far astray, couldn't they also bring us back together? That spark of hope quickly turned to dread as Jesus turned his gaze directly on me. "Now," he said, his voice filled with sorrow, "it's time for you to see your own reflection." My heart pounded as I realized what was coming next. Suddenly, the courtroom faded away, and I found myself watching scenes from my own life. It was like looking through a window into my past, but this time, I saw everything through God's eyes. I saw myself sitting behind the news desk, my face perfectly made up, my words sharp and biting. "Tonight, we're talking about the latest blunder from the opposition," I heard myself say, a smirk playing on my lips. "It's clear they don't have a clue how to run this country." I watched as my words stirred up anger in the viewers. Families who were watching together started arguing, their faces red with fury. Friends who disagreed stopped talking to each other. My stomach churned as I realized the impact of my careless words. Jesus showed me clip after clip of my debates and commentary over the years. I saw myself twisting facts to fit my narrative, using inflammatory language to get a reaction. "They're not just wrong," I heard myself say in one heated debate. "They're a danger to everything we hold dear in this nation." My words echoed through the courtroom, each one feeling like a knife in my heart. I saw the ripple effect of my commentary, people sharing my clips on social media, adding their own angry comments. The darkness I had seen earlier grew stronger with each share, each angry reply. I watched a scene where a father and daughter were watching one of my segments together. The daughter, barely a teenager, looked up at her dad with confusion in her eyes. "Dad, are all people who think differently from us bad?" she asked. The father, his face twisted with anger from my words, nodded. "They're trying to destroy our way of life," he said. Tears streamed down my face as I realized how my words were shaping the next generation. I was teaching them to hate, to fear those who were different. This wasn't the legacy I wanted to leave. The evidence of my guilt piled up higher and higher. Every snarky comment, every exaggeration, every half-truth, it all added up to a mountain of division and hatred. I felt sick to my stomach as I understood the true weight of my actions. "Lord," I whispered, my voice choked with tears, "I had no idea. I thought I was just doing my job, telling the truth as I saw it." But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. Deep down, I had always known that my words were divisive. I just didn't care. I was more interested in ratings, in being the most talked about commentator. I had sold my integrity for fame and fortune. As the last scene faded away, I found myself back in the courtroom, face to face with Jesus. His eyes were filled with sorrow, but also with love. I couldn't bear to look at him. The weight of my actions crushed me, and I fell to my knees. "Lord," I sobbed, "I'm so sorry. I've been part of the problem all along. I've been feeding the darkness, stirring up anger and resentment. How could I have been so blind?" I thought about all the people I had influenced over the years. How many relationships had I damaged? How many hearts had I hardened? The responsibility was almost too much to bear. In that moment, I realized that my voice hadn't just been a drop in the ocean, it had been a tsunami, leaving destruction in its wake. The weight of my sins felt unbearable. I couldn't breathe. My heart raced as I realized the full extent of the damage I'd caused. What could I possibly say to make this right? I collapsed to my knees before Jesus, trembling. Tears streamed down my face, blurring my vision. I wanted to explain, to justify myself, but I knew there was no excuse for what I'd done. Guilt washed over me in waves, threatening to drown me. I thought about all the people I had influenced over the years. How many relationships had I damaged? How many hearts had I hardened? The responsibility was almost too much to bear. I had been so focused on ratings and being a talked-about commentator that I lost sight of what really mattered. "Jesus," I whispered, my voice shaking. "I'm so sorry. I didn't realize how much harm I was causing. I was blind to the darkness I was spreading." I looked up at him, his face full of love and sorrow. "Please forgive me. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm begging you for another chance." The words tumbled out of me, raw and honest. "I want to change. I want to undo all the damage I've done. Please, show me how to heal the divisions I've created. I'll do anything, say anything to make this right." I thought about the father who told his daughter that people with different views were trying to destroy their way of life. That was my fault. I had planted those seeds of fear and mistrust. And the group of friends whose friendly conversation turned into a shouting match because of something I said on my show, I caused that too. Lord, I see now how every word, every action ripples out and affects others. I've been so careless with my influence. I laughed about how controversy sells, never thinking about the real cost. I bowed my head, overwhelmed by shame. I don't know if I can fix all the broken relationships, all the trust that's been lost, but I want to try. Please give me that chance. I waited, hardly daring to breathe. What if it was too late? What if I'd gone too far, caused too much damage? The silence stretched on, and I felt my hope start to fade. Doubt crept in, whispering that I was beyond redemption. Then I felt a gentle touch on my shoulder. I looked up to see Jesus kneeling beside me, his eyes filled with compassion. "Madison," he said softly, "your heart is truly repentant. That's the first step towards healing." Relief washed over me, but Jesus wasn't finished. "The road ahead won't be easy," he continued. "You'll face resistance, skepticism, and even hatred from those who don't understand your change of heart. Are you willing to endure that for the sake of unity and love?" I nodded without hesitation. "Yes, Lord, whatever it takes. I want to be a voice for unity, not division. I want to bring people together instead of tearing them apart." Jesus smiled, and I felt a warmth spread through my chest. "Then go," he said, "and be a light in the darkness. Show others the power of forgiveness and reconciliation. Remember, every act of love, no matter how small, pushes back against the forces of division." I stood up, feeling a strength and purpose I'd never known before. "I will, Lord," I promised. "I'll dedicate my life to healing the wounds I've helped create. I'll speak the truth in love, even when it's hard. And I'll never forget the lesson you've taught me today." As I prepared to leave that heavenly courtroom, I knew my life would never be the same. The old Madison, the one who cared more about ratings than people's hearts, was gone. In her place stood someone new, someone determined to make a difference. Jesus looked at me with eyes that seemed to see right into my soul. His gaze was filled with so much love and understanding, I felt my heart might burst. When he began to speak, his voice was like thunder and whispers all at once. It shook me to my core, but also wrapped around me like a warm embrace. "Madison," he said, "the forces of darkness are strong. They've gained much ground in your nation, but they are not unbeatable." As he spoke, images began to flash before my eyes. I saw a young woman stop to help an elderly man who had dropped his groceries. Their political views couldn't have been more different, but in that moment, none of that mattered. Just two humans being kind to one another. In another scene, I watched a father and son sitting down to talk. They'd been estranged for years over their beliefs, but now they were choosing to listen, really listen to each other. It wasn't easy, but they were trying, and with each moment of understanding, a little light pushed back the darkness around them. Jesus continued, "These small acts of love and compassion may seem insignificant, but they are not. They ripple outward, touching more lives than you can imagine. I saw those ripples in action. A kind word to a stressed cashier led to her smiling at the next customer. That customer then held the door for someone else. On and on it went, each small act creating a chain reaction of kindness. But it wasn't just individual acts. I saw entire communities coming together. People who'd been divided by politics, race, or religion were finding common ground. They were sharing meals, working on projects side by side, and really getting to know each other as fellow human beings. "Look," Jesus said, gesturing to a group of people gathered in a circle. They were praying, their heads bowed and hands linked. "These are my warriors of light. They stand firm against the spiritual attacks on your nation." I watched in awe as beams of light shot up from these prayer circles, piercing through the dark clouds that hung over America. The darkness hissed and recoiled wherever the light touched it. Their prayers are powerful weapons, Jesus explained. They break down barriers, soften hearts, and create openings for my love to flood in. As I continued to watch, I saw something amazing happen. All these acts of love and kindness, all these prayers, they were starting to push back the darkness. It wasn't happening all at once, but bit by bit, the light was growing stronger. Jesus turned to me, his face serious but full of hope. Madison, this is how you fight the darkness. Not with more anger or fear or division. Those only feed the enemy. You fight darkness with light. You fight hate with love. It's not always easy, but it's the only way to truly win. I nodded, feeling a mix of determination and fear. But Lord, I said, I've caused so much damage. How can I possibly make a difference now? Jesus smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through clouds. Your past does not define you, Madison. What matters is what you choose to do from this moment forward. Every act of love, no matter how small, makes a difference. And when my children come together in love and unity, there is no force of darkness that can stand against them. As the vision began to fade, I understood deep in my soul that hope was not lost for America. Yes, the battle was fierce. Yes, the enemy was strong. But we had a choice. We could choose love over hate, unity over division, forgiveness over bitterness. And if enough of us made that choice, we could change everything. I felt a warm, gentle light wrap around me like a blanket, pulling me back from the heavenly courtroom. Everything blurred and faded as I returned to my body. My heart raced. Would I remember all I had seen? Would I have the courage to live it out? As I rushed back, it felt like being squeezed through a tunnel. Tingling spread through my limbs as if waking from deep sleep. The heavenly light dimmed, replaced by harsh fluorescent glare. With a gasp, my eyes flew open. I was back in the hospital room. Monitors beeped steadily as concerned faces looked down at me. My producer, Lisa, stood there, eyes wide with worry and relief. A doctor checked my vitals. Madison, can you hear me? Lisa asked shakily. You collapsed during the debate. We've been so worried. After sipping some water, I found my voice. How long was I out? About 3 hours, the doctor said. Your heart actually stopped for a few minutes. 3 hours? It felt like days. How could I explain what I'd seen? But I knew what I needed to do. Lisa, I said, I'm resigning from the network. Effective immediately. Lisa's jaw dropped. What? Madison, you can't be serious. You're our top commentator. I shook my head. I've never been clearer. I can't go back to what I was doing. God showed me what's happening to our country. The division, the hatred, it's destroying us. And I've been part of the problem. I have to help bring people together. Lisa stared in disbelief. Madison, you're talking nonsense. You need to rest. No, I insisted. I died, Lisa. I died, and God sent me back with a message. We have to stop tearing each other apart. We're all human beings, all children of God, no matter our politics. I saw doubt in Lisa's eyes, but curiosity too. This change must have shocked her. What exactly are you planning? She asked cautiously. For a moment, doubt crept in. Was I ready to give up everything? But I remembered Jesus' words, and my resolve strengthened. I'm starting a movement, I said, for unity and healing. I'll use my platform, my connections, everything, but not for division or ratings, for bringing people together, choosing love over hate. The doctor urged me to rest, and I nodded, exhausted. But sleep wouldn't change my mind. What I'd seen was burned into my soul. There was no going back. My journey from division to unity taught me that love is our greatest weapon against darkness. I've seen how kindness can spark a chain reaction, pushing back the shadows that divide us. Every day, we choose to build walls or bridges. Will we listen to fear or reach out with compassion? Even small gestures of understanding can heal deep wounds. It's never too late to change our story and heal our nation. God showed me what's possible if we choose love over hate. Here's what you can do. Reach out to someone different from you. Listen without judgment. Share a meal. Together, we can plant seeds of unity that grow into a garden of hope for America. I'm still learning daily. Will you join this journey of healing?